Bonjour tout le monde. Oh mon Dieu, vous allez en France? Are you going to France? J'espère que oui. J'aime la France. I love France. I just recently went in May 2023, and it had been 10 years since I'd been to Paris. I'd been to some other cities in France in between then. But I am always so inspired by the art, the architecture, the fashion, the people, the food. I could sit and people watch for days. And so if you ever get a chance, Paris is just everything, and it is just such a cool experience to go see and be introduced to different ideas of living. So, if that opportunity ever pops up, make sure that you take advantage of it. So, vous allez en France? So, this is a little bit complicated because this takes more memorization. So, you're going to have to remember to be more patient with yourself or put in a little more effort when it comes to memorization of vocabulary, because this is a lot between knowing what is masculine, what is feminine, and a lot of small details. So, with the exceptions of cities, most geographical locations are accompanied by a definite article, and each has a gender and number. So, let's do a little bit of translation work. La France est un beau pays. La France est un beau pays. So France is a beautiful country. And notice that France is feminine, la France. Le deuxième exemple, the second example, le Québec est une province canadienne. Quebec is a Canadian province. Il y a combien de provinces en Canada? Il y a combien de provinces en Canada? So, how many provinces are there in Canada, our neighbor to the north? Il y a 10 provinces. Il y a 10. So, there are 10 provinces. So, Quebec, notice that le Quebec, so Quebec in this example est masculine, is masculine. And the troisième exemple, the third example, les États-Unis sont Amérique du Nord. United States is in North America. So the United States is masculine plural. So remember, with the exceptions of cities, most geographical locations are accompanied by a definite article, and each has a gender and number. Again, what makes this so hard is that there's a lot of geographical locations. And so, of course, there are some rules that you could follow, but it just takes a lot of practice. So after verbs like aller and venir, a preposition is required before geographical locations. We discussed that in the last lesson. Je vais à. Often comes after aller because you are going to someplace. The choice of preposition depends on whether you're talking about a city, a country, or continent, and whether that location is masculine or feminine, singular or plural. The simplest case is cities, which use prepositions to express into and from. So, par exemple, on va. On va à Paris. On va à Montréal. So we are going to Paris, we are going to Montreal. This one's a little bit easier because you're going to a place. And so a lot of times after aller, you're going to have the preposition à. If I'm returning or I'm coming from, on vient de Paris, on vient de Montréal. So, just to give you a small example of masculine countries and feminine countries, because, well, actuellement, il y a combien de pays dans le monde? Il y a combien de pays dans le monde? So, how many countries are in the world? There's 196. So, that's a lot of countries to know and memorize. And so, these are just a handful. I think I picked four to show you what countries are masculine and what countries are feminine in French. You have le Canada, le Japon, le Mexique, les Pays-Bas. So the last one would be the Netherlands, which translates to the low country, and that is because they are at sea level. So in French and Spanish, they both say el País Bajo, the low country, or le Pays-Bas, which means the low country. But we translate that into the Netherlands. Okay, so feminine countries: l'Allemand, la France, la Chine, l'Italie. So again, this is just 8 of those 196 countries. So a lot to memorize about which one is masculine, which one's feminine. Ones that start with A or any kind of other vowel, L apostrophe, still could be masculine or feminine. So there's just a lot to memorize here. So masculine countries use o and do, or os and they for the plural countries, such as les États-Unis and les Pays-Bas, whereas feminine countries in all continents use n and de. So masculine countries. So remember, a plus le equals o, and a plus les equals os. De plus le equals do, and de plus les equals they. So if I want to say I'm going to Mexico, it would be on va à le Mexique, and so a plus le equals o. So on va au Mexique, on va au Brazil, on va au Japon, on va aux États-Unis, on va aux Pays-Bas. On vient du Mexique, because it would be on vient de le Mexique, and so de plus le equals do. On vient du Mexique, on vient du Brésil, on vient du Japon, on vient des États-Unis, on vient des Pays-Bas. Masculine countries use o and de, so this is again le même show, the same thing, mais avec le pas féminin. So here, if I'm going to a country, so feminine countries and continents use n and de. So if I am using the verb aller, so this is where it's just a little bit tricky. So on va en Allemand. We are going to Germany. On va en Chine. So feminine countries use en. So I'm going to Allemand. On va en Chine. On va en Egypte. On va en France. On va en Italie. On va en Afrique. On va en Asie. On vient d'Allemand. On vient de Chine. A little bit easier with, I think, coming from, as long as you can remember which one is masculine and feminine. On vient d'Egypte. On vient de France. On vient de l'Italie. On vient d'Afrique. On vient d'Asie. So just a lot of small details to remember. Definitely with French being the second language that I learned, it's definitely more of a challenge for me because I have to work a lot harder on it because I don't have as many hours logged. And so, this has definitely taken me much more time to get down pat. So make sure you're patient with yourself and realize that it is a lot of information and a lot of hours need to be spent memorizing and practicing. So, with that being said, I just really wanted to say this. We're talking a lot about feminine and masculine because a lot in Romance languages we have masculine countries, feminine countries, and the same with adjectives and nouns and so on. And I, years ago, came across this book called The Secret Lives of Color. And just in general, being a curious person with understanding and being curious about other cultures and languages, this is something that I found really fascinating. And so I just wanted to talk about the color pink because I know I did a really stereotypical thing and labeled the feminine countries this like light shade of beige and the masculine countries blue. But it's a great segue into the actually history of pink. And so we're just going to take a quick second to learn about the history of the color pink before we continue. So pink is for girls and blue is for boys. The evidence is everywhere in the Pink and Blue Project, which began in 2005. But amazingly enough, the strict girl pink, blue boy blue divide only dates from the mid 20th century. Just a few scant generations ago, the situation was completely different. In an article on baby clothes in the New York Times in 1893, the rule stated was that you should always give pink to a boy and blue to a girl. Neither the author nor the woman in the shop whom she was interviewing were quite sure why, but the author hazarded a tongue-in-cheek guess. The boy's outlook is so much more roseate than the girl's, she wrote, that it is enough to make a girl baby blue to think of living a woman's life in this world. In 1918, a trade publication affirmed that this was generally the accepted rule because pink was the more decided and stronger color, which blue was more delicate and dainty. This is probably closer to the real explanation. Pink is, after all, just faded red, which in the era of scarlet jacketed soldiers and red robed cardinals was the most masculine color, while blue was the signature hue of the Virgin Mary. At the turn of the century, even the idea of different clothes for children of different sexes was a little odd. The mortality and birth rates were so high that all children under the age of 2 wore easy to bleach white linen dresses. So I just find that so fascinating about evolution, the evolution of colors, that colors have a history. And a lot of times it takes me back to a lot of these colors to French culture, Dutch culture, and Spanish culture. So it's really fascinating. So that was my little history of the color pink, which is très intéressant, no? Okay, so maybe I distracted you for a second about how difficult this lesson is, but here we are. We are going to fill in the blank with the correct preposition. So go ahead, take a second, and go for it. See how we do, and then I will give you the correct response. Oh, so numéro un, je vais à Paris et je viens de Madrid. Madrid est la capitale. Espagne, Espagne. Bien fait. Qui va à Berlin? Qui va à Berlin? Berlin, la capitale de Allemagne. So again, cities usually take a and de. If you're going to it, would be a if you're going to a city, and de if you're returning. Numéro 3, on revient du Mexique. So revient because Mexique is masculine. on revient du Mexique. Numéro 4, New Zealand aux Pays-Bas. The Netherlands is one of my favorite countries in the world. I love Dutch culture. I love Dutch people. I love Amsterdam. Numéro 5, ma famille est d'Italie. I'm speaking slow because it should have been est, your verb. So ma famille est. D apostrophe because we're coming from Italy. Numéro 6, il va à Moscou. Moscow est la capitale. What is Moscow the capital of? Russia. Russe. Numéro 7, il est né. So this part, il est né, he was born. Je suis né, I was born. Tu es né, you were born. Nous, nous sommes nés, we were born. So il est né au Sénégal. Il est né au Sénégal. So A plus le would make O. Il est né au Sénégal. Numéro 8, l'espérance de Gina vient du Japon. Oh, yes, so my answer has the correct spelling of the verb. I was missing an N. L'espérance de Gina vient du Japon. So de plus le equals du. Numéro 9, Frank est né. So Frank was born. Frank est né in the United States, aux États-Unis. Et numéro 10, on va au Mexique. On va à le Mexique. So A plus le equals O. So hopefully I have not confused you too much, but with practice, all things are possible. That is the growth mindset. And if you're not making mistakes, you're not trying. That's definitely a part of the learning language process. So, on y va, we will continue to move forward, and bonne journée.